Hello and welcome to episode 55 of the Dental Realist podcast. I am Dr. Ryder Waldron and I'm joined as usual by Dr. Marcus D. Neff and Dr. Troy Stevens. Troy, how's it going tonight?
Doing really well. Thanks for asking. I appreciate you caring and being concerned about me.
I really do care. Yeah.
I know you do.
Marcus, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I made it through the end of the day. Should have been a slam dunk patient and just couldn't get him numb. Finally did get him numb. Got it done.
Happens to the
How
best.
many carpals you had to do? 20?
No, yeah, 21. No,
21. Yeah, there
three.
you go.
3 carpules. 3 carpules of anesthetic.
Wow, good one.
Gotta love
well,
those.
Guys, we have just an awesome guest tonight, so let's get right into it. Tonight we're going to be joined by Dr. Jeffrey Cole. Dr. Cole was the president of the American Dental Association from 2018 to 19, president of the Academy of General Dentistry from 2012 to 2013. He's practiced dentistry since 1993. He earned his DDS degree from Georgetown University and has way too many other professional credentials to mention right now because we'd be here all night reading them off. So, Dr. Cole, thanks so much for joining us, and how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's my pleasure to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, we are super excited. We're just excited to get your unique perspective as someone who's practiced dentistry, has worked in leadership positions in organized dentistry, and so we got a lot of stuff we want to cover tonight. So let's just get right into it. What are your thoughts on the rising cost of dental school education right now?
I was recently recognized by the American Student Dental Association with their Paragon Award, and that is that group's highest honor. And the reason that they chose me was because of, I think, a big part my advocacy efforts with regard to student debt. I've been concerned with the cost of education, of dental education, for probably more than a decade, and quite honestly, ever since I went to dental school. And so I think it's something that is increasingly more of a problem. It is a problem that, while it's a hurdle, is certainly manageable, but more and more I think that it's a situation that needs the help of all of organized dentistry, and it really needs the attention of the students who are embarking on their career and really investing their time and money to become a dentist.
Okay.
Right. Do you think that it's sustainable long term if our costs keep rising? Do you think we're going to start seeing a decrease in dental students? Like people who want to go to dental school because, return on investment stuff.
I will tell you, you would think that, and I'm really concerned about ultimately the return on investment, and that's what I mentioned. Students have to be really concerned about that. But I think the economic drivers that are allowing dental school education to be the highest of any profession is that we continue to be called the best profession, whether it's number 1, 2, or 3 by, national publications, U.S. News and World Reports, and USA Today. And what's happening is we are getting a lot of applicants, a lot of great applicants, and at the same time, there is no economic drivers for that cost to really go down. And even in studying the cost of dental education, the American Dental Association, while I was a trustee and member of the board, spent several $100,000 studying all the different models of education to see if there was one out there that offered a better economic reality to education. And what we found was there was really no silver bullet. But I think that the point you bring up is a good one, in that economics is what drives costs, kind of supply and demand. But right now, the supply of potential dental students is very great. And to be honest with you, with those students who want to go to dental school, with those foreign trained dentists who want to a chance to learn in a U.S. dental school and to be licensed here, I think that demand is great, and at this point is not really showing any sign of slowing, and that concerns me because that means that these costs can still go up.
Right. Yeah, we had our dean of our dental school on our podcast a couple times, and we've asked him that kind of question. Said, hey, have you seen a decrease in applications due to rising costs? And he said the same thing. No, we have not. At this point, still seems people are still trying to go into dentistry. Like you say, everybody looks at those reports and things like that, and sure enough, dentists are ranked pretty darn high.
What advice, Dr. Cole, would you give for new dentists entering practice right now who may have, graduated in the last couple of years?
Well, first of all, I would say I would hope that they had a good financial plan, a good debt management plan while they were a student. And I also hope that they had a good professional career strategic plan. And while those type of plans don't have to be always followed to the letter, there's always time to tweak and pivot and augment those plans. I hope they find themselves entering practice in a comfortable place. And so that would be kind of my first advice. My second advice would be to always stay in tune to where your patients are, understanding that your patients are consumers. And what we're seeing more and more in any business and in dentistry as well, that it's really the consumer experience, how they experience what you do as a professional, which is really important. And so not to lose sight of that as far as not only the dentist and patient relationship, but really how they look at their customers' experience, look at trends, economic trends that are affecting our profession, and for them as professionals to stay ahead of the curve and to make sure that whatever practice model or career that they have in dentistry, that they always keep in mind that things are changing and they really want to be proactive and not reactive.
Okay, that's great, because the three of us talk a lot about how dangerous debt can be, and you're already coming out of dental school with a lot of debt. And there was a story recently about I believe it was an orthodontist in my area who was well over $1 million in debt by the time he got done with school, and then it's like tough to fight out of that afterwards. And if you choose to buy a practice, that's just even more debt upon debt. And man, that's good advice, I think.
Yeah, when you're thinking of all the different types of opportunities people have, we've talked about this on our podcast and we've given our opinions, but what type of practice setting do you recommend? Like a startup, a group practice, corporate, public health, buying existing practice? Do you have any recommendations there or any words of wisdom?
Well, first I'll have a disclaimer. I have a bias. I've been a private practice general dentist and a practice owner for the vast majority of my career. And so I think that by and large, being a business owner, a practice owner, gives you a lot of autonomy and at the same time gives you the opportunity to really make your mark, and I think to be hugely financially successful, more than if you are, say, an employee. That said, I know there's a lot of different opportunities, right? There's academia. As a member of the 4th District of the American Dental Association, which I represented as a trustee and was the one who elected me, it is geographic, like a lot of the districts, the Mid-Atlantic states, so it was New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. We also represented Washington, D.C., so the D.C. Dental Society, as well as 2 territories of the U.S., Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and also all the federal dental services. So I represented the armed services of Army, Navy, and Air Force, their dental corps, as well as everyone in U.S. public health. So everyone in public health that was in a federal uniform, as well as everyone who had a federal paycheck, to say maybe worked for the federal corrections department, and also the Department of Veterans Affairs. And so there are a lot of opportunities out there, really depending on what people are looking for. One of the best advice that I can give is for when individuals are setting their career goals, is to maybe get an understanding of where they think geographically they want to end up. Because while there's a lot of things that affect opportunities for individuals, I think geography is one of them. We talk about things like corporate-owned large group practices. They're very big in some areas and non-existent in others. There's certain things to say about rural practices versus urban practices. And so what we've known historically about dentists, and of course there can always be paradigm shifts, but we know historically they've always gone back to where they came from. And the second most popular is to stay where they went to dental school. And the third most popular is to stay where they did a residency. And then they can go, kind of different places from there. But I think that as people are looking not only in what type of practice setting or what they're looking for as far as a career as a professional in dentistry, maybe to try to hone down at least a couple areas geographically. Because, for instance, in private practice, if you want to be a practice owner, you can, do it through acquisition by an existing practice or to do a startup. They're both possible, but it really depends on the lender. And a lot of the lenders who are really comfortable with financing not only somebody's student debt, but a startup practice, it really depends geographically about where they're looking to go. And so if I could maybe give any real, what seems like simple practical advice, is to try to get an idea of at least one or several areas geographically where you think you want to end up practicing. And I think it makes some of those other decisions a little bit easier.
Yeah, kind of look for the area you want to practice and then see what's available in that area.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Good advice. One of the things that I've thought about is, going back to the student debt load. If somebody comes out of school with a $500,000 in student loans, does it make sense to look at private practice right off, given the amount of practice debt that they would take on in addition to their student loans, or does it make sense to look at one of those other routes and then pursue private practice?
Well, I think that when debt is higher, there's a couple things to consider. Number one is refinancing that debt. And so to answer your question, there's some avenues that while refinancing will save sometimes, 30, 40, 50,000 or more over the life of the loan. Some of those refinancing opportunities require at least a history of employment. Now, some of them, the ADAs, for instance, would accept a residency as kind of that security of employment. And so, to answer your question there, if people are looking to refinance, looking to start managing some of that debt, usually an employee opportunity allows them to do that a little bit easier. If they're looking to hopefully purchase a practice, then what makes sense is an employee opportunity that may turn into a partnership or a buyout sometime shortly down the road. That enables them to refinance maybe their debt once, just the student debt, and then to look at, through the acquisition of that practice, securing the right financing to not only cover the loans, but also the debt service on the practice. So it does make sense with the higher the debt load to really look at, getting your feet pretty steady and showing a lender that, you at least have some history of, being able to practice and produce at a good level. And I think that that's, what you suggest there, and looking at those type of opportunities is good advice.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Dr. Cole, as somebody who has years of dentistry under his belt, more than the three of us, obviously, uh, the dental students that are listening to us right now, or new dentists that have been out of school a little bit, um, there's a lot of excitement. You're ready to get out of school. You're going to make a ton of money. Dentistry is always rated as one of the top professions. But what would be some of your concerns for new dentists and dental students right now?
Well, it's funny. You kind of started that saying they're very excited. And I think that is what is awesome, because they do come out very excited. And
Yeah.
when we look at the new generation, whether millennials, or now soon we're going to be seeing Gen Zs, coming into dentistry, the one thing about their generation is they really want to make a difference, right? And they also find, I often joke that, in the old days, they called people like us impatient, and now they call them millennials, but they do like to see some immediacy, right,
Yeah.
to their efforts. And so what concerns me, what worries me, whether it's advocacy, whether it's dental practice, whether it's where you want to be as a professional, whether it's getting involved in organized dentistry, that sometimes some of those efforts take a little bit longer than they may like. And so my concern is that they may get disappointed, disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And what I want to let them know is that really the future of our profession, I believe it's really bright. I think that there's a lot of challenges that we as a group of professionals need to overcome. But, I tell dental students they're in control of their own professional destiny. And sometimes there may be a few bumps in the road, sometimes because of the level that we are out at as professionals, maybe some difficulties that they've never had to encounter before. But not to lose faith, not to lose hope, because I believe in what U.S. News and World Reports and USA Today says. This is the best profession. I'll tell you, it's not always the easiest job, right?
Definitely.
Getting people numb and making patients happy, and, doing everything clinically to the book, and find out that, a procedure may fail. I mean, we see that all the time. But what we do have is our profession behind us. We have our colleagues around us. We have a professional family, and I think that's what ends up making a difference in the long run. But some of what we are aspiring to within our profession, I think sometimes there's disappointments. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and just not to lose sight. Always keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah, that's great
Right.
advice. The three of us have talked before about how we would go shadow dentists before we went to dental school, and everything seemed amazing. You know, the staff got along well, the procedures always worked out perfectly, and then you get out of dental school and like, oh crap, that DO on 13 fell out that I put in last week, or so, you know, something like that. So
Mhm.
there is some disappointment. If you let it get to you too much, then you might lose your mind. Can you tell us anything about the Competitive Health Insurance Reform Act and how it will help dentistry? I've read a little bit about this, but I don't have a law degree, so I'm not even sure exactly what I'm reading. It's just supposed to help something, help with insurances and things like that. But if you could give us some insight into that, that'd be great.
Sure, because I'll tell you, um, I think this is a huge win for dentistry in two areas. One is the legislation, and number two is how we were able to lobby for this to effectively, in a very bipartisan way, make something positive happen in Washington. So if I could, first I'll talk a little bit about this act, otherwise known as McCarran-Ferguson reform. And
Yeah.
so, just a little history lesson. Back at the turn of the 20th century, there had been a lot of monopolies. There was problems economically with price fixing and things such as this. And so there were federal laws put into place that we all have to follow, that we can't be anti-competitive, that we can't set prices, that we can't keep people out of the marketplace, right? Because whenever there's open markets, and we've talked a little bit about the economics of dentistry, but any industry, the more competition there is, the better it is for everyone, particularly the consumer or the patient. Now, those laws have been in place for all of us as dental practice owners and of everyone, except two areas. Number one was insurance, where they were completely exempt, and the other was organized crime. And so if you really think of it, how could all that time insurance companies be allowed to collude, share their information, fix prices, keep competitors out of the marketplace? It really boggles the mind, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so for
Mhm.
many years, every time dentists get together, and the minute we start talking about dental insurance, we have to be careful because of antitrust concerns to make sure that we're not colluding. But on the other side, dental insurance companies not only do it all the time, but they were given an exemption from the federal government. And so we have been lobbying just to make sure that the economics allow alternatives to dental plans to come into play, which would be better for not only our patients but for our profession. And so we started lobbying for this, I would say, maybe for more than a decade. When a fellow dentist, Paul Gosar from Arizona, became elected as a congressman, he himself being a very conservative Republican, he went to one of the most influential liberal Democrats in the House and said, "Do you think we could agree on this legislation?" And in fact, they did. And in fact, McCarran-Ferguson reform, this same act, in the last maybe 5, 6 years, has passed the House of Representatives three separate times, almost unanimously, in a very bipartisan way. Every time it's gone to the Senate, it's been held up in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I just recently put a post that was not only about this act just being signed into law, but back in 2019, when I was president of the ADA, going to shore up what was called a statement of administrative policy of the president. I went to the White House, who, when these bills were being passed in the Congress, he gave, through that statement of administrative policy, basically the green light that if this comes to my desk, I will surely sign it. So the only holdup was the U.S. Senate, and in particular, the Senate Judiciary Committee. And, we always heard they were too busy. We're doing federal judges, and we're trying to confirm them. And then, of course, they had to deal with an impeachment, and then Supreme Court justices. But I think the reality was the Senate really did not feel comfortable bringing a bill to the floor that, if they voted for it, would somehow kind of upset the insurance lobby, because there was a lot of influence, a lot of money there. Now, I think what is amazing here is that at a time when I think we could all agree things don't work well and real smooth in Washington, D.C., we not only had a bill pass the U.S. House of Representatives nearly unanimously, but just throughout the holidays, where there was a lot of rancor and a lot of bitter partisanship over the COVID relief bill, this bill came out of the Judiciary Committee, passed the U.S. Senate by unanimous consent, unanimously, and then went to the president, who signed it on January 13th. Now, the thing about a lot of the dental students that may be watching or listening, and a lot of the students who have been, advocating with ASDA, going to Capitol Hill, whenever we go to Capitol Hill and we're advocating on behalf of oral health, we say that we are there neither as Republicans or Democrats, that we're there as members of the Tooth Party. And we wear a molar-shaped Tooth Party pin with an American flag on it.
Nice.
And we are able to really talk to individuals about what's important for oral health, for our patients, for our profession. And we really can achieve bipartisan support where things like that have not been happening in Washington. And I think it's a testament to ADPAC, our American Dental Political Action Committee, our lobby staff at the ADA, our members who constantly are getting involved politically through organized dentistry. I think that's as great of a story as the fact that we actually passed a bill that will make insurance company play by the same fair rules that every other business does.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the very big, and you know this, you understand this, that the frustration feels like we cannot do anything against these companies because they're too big. And this act sounds like it's going to help us quite a bit.
Well, you know what, I think it will, because when we talk about dental insurance, it's really a misnomer, right? It's not even insurance. Right. It's an assistant plan. Yep. And when we're looking at plans like the ADA used to promote direct reimbursement years ago, they would go to employers and say, don't even bother paying for a plan. Why don't you just reimburse the costs up until what you would pay? Yep. People have different ideas of putting plans within their offices. When we're talking about innovations in all of business, there's so much of possibilities out there. And again, what should drive those possibilities is not unfair federal laws holding competition down, but rather competition. Let it go, because ultimately what's driving all of business and even healthcare is what people think of their experience. And I think that this bill is going to allow that to be the driver and not anti-competitive behavior.
That's what we need. We definitely need the competition, because then let the private sector iron it out and work it out. They always do things better than the government.
I think you're right on that one. That's for sure.
You answered a lot of our questions that we had regarding that part. Let's move on, maybe a couple other questions we have, just kind of get your idea on what it's like to be in organized dentistry. What would you say is the main reason for a dentist to join the ADA or the AGD?
Well, we've talked just now about advocacy, right?
Right.
There's so much that organized dentistry does with regard to advocacy for our members and for the profession. So when you look at, for instance, the American Dental Association, their constitutional purpose is twofold. It's number one, to advance the art and science of dentistry, which is to promote the profession and promote us as members of the profession. The other thing is to promote the oral health of the public. So we have those two roles. And in becoming a part of something bigger than just an individual, becoming a part of the organizations, the groups that do that, I think it's not only what we do as professionals, I think it's our obligation, right? Because when we join the ADA, we also ascribe to its code of ethics. And what sets us apart as professionals, and not just people in a job or a career, everybody wants to call themselves professionals, but there's reasons why we as dentists are professionals, right? We have doctoral degrees. We have to become licensed by a group that's outside of those that actually, were able to educate us. We have to ascribe to really a jury of our peers if something doesn't go right, through our state boards. And so we, as a profession, we police ourselves. We ascribe to a code of ethics. That's what makes us professionals. And so for me, that's the biggest reason why people should join organized dentistry. But I'll tell you, here's the difficulty there. As things evolve, societies change, people's outlooks change. And we are seeing that not only in all of society, but really in our profession. And so while everybody likes the idea of the advocacy and doing what's right by our profession and by our patients, more and more there's an individualistic attitude of dentists that says all of that is great, but for me to cut a check, for me to join, what can you do for me? And I think that is the real challenge for organized dentistry, to start really addressing in a very innovative way, in a very proactive way, understanding as experts, what do our members need the most? What do they want? And then delivering, I was talking a little bit about our patients' consumer experience, but it's really about the consumer experience of members of our profession with organized dentistry. That is a huge challenge that I hope that all of organized dentistry is really up to. When I ran for
Dr.
president
Cole,
yes, go ahead.
And that's one of my questions is, the ADA is a very large organization. How does it stay in contact with the grassroots of dentistry, that solo practitioner in South Dakota? How do they keep that connection and have that buy-in from the average dentist in the U.S.?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that it's through communication. That's number one. And I think that, as an individual leader who communicated to our members, I tried to change the manner, the way in which that was done. I think more and more could be done in that regard. I think the other is to have some major touch points with real good business focused data, market research, So not only surveys, quantitative research of what our members want, but really qualitatively going out with focus groups, meeting with members, and really getting into the psyche as far as, what's difficult, what's keeping you up at night, what can we do as an organization to really help you. And I think, like I said, that's the challenge for all of organized dentistry. Part of the difficulty there is the way that associations are run, the business of associations. I started saying when I ran for ADA president, my platform was really to step away from business as usual. Much of what we do is really nonprofit and association focused. We've reached a point where we talk about the cost of dental school. How about the cost of membership fees in organized dentistry? I mean, our dentists pay, and that's the most income, right? The highest percentage of income of the ADA through its dues to do all of these great things. There becomes a time where the ADA needs to be able to function not only very innovatively, like some of the best companies out there, but most efficiently, being able to make money in certain business areas that not only help our members, but help the bottom line so that we are not looking at major amounts of dues to really support what they do. And so I think, that's kind of the long answer to your question, and you have to excuse me. Sometimes it's the MBA in me that comes out. But I think that for me, so much comes back to the economics of running a business, the economics of our profession, the market research, and really understanding the insight of our members, of our patients. And I think that that's where all of organized dentistry really needs to become more focused and innovative if they're going to be successful in the long term, because there is a lot out there to help our members, to help our profession. Look at your podcast, look at what's on social media. There's a ton of continuing education opportunities depending on what's out there. And for organized dentistry to be hugely successful, they really have to, like you said, stay in touch with what is going to help the members the most, to be member focused. If I could give you an example, I think sometimes we look at medicine, and sometimes medicine really has a way of showing us what not to do sometimes. But the American Medical Association, they were historically a member-driven organization that really spoke on behalf of all of medicine. And more what's happened, they have backed off. They aren't really focused on membership. They're focused on policy. What drives that organization economically, quite honestly, is a lot of business ventures that have nothing to do with medicine. I think they make most of their money on revenue from parking lots in the Chicago area, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so what happens is they're policy makers, but they're not really representing the individual practitioners, and they're going to their specialty groups and that type of thing. That's something where I think dentistry needs to stay stronger, needs to be a little bit different. And I think that is really the challenge of organized dentistry, to, like you said, stay really in touch with the grassroots members.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So apparently, if you want to be president of something, you need to live in Delaware, because you have been president of the AGD, the ADA, and now Joe Biden is president of the United States. So what I really want to know is, how does someone become president of the ADA?
Okay. That's an interesting question, because most of our members don't know. And when I was running for ADA president, they put our platforms and a little bio in the ADA News. And I got a
Yep.
call from a dentist in Michigan. And he said, "Hey, I've never really gotten involved or read these things before, but I liked what you had to say." He called me at my office, and we talked for a good time. And turned out that we had a lot in common. We both graduated about the same time. We had about the same background, same type of practice. We even found out we had a love of fishing. That was a lot of conversation there. But ultimately, he said when it was done, "I want to vote for you. How do I do that?" And I laughed. I said, "Well, you can't. It's your delegation from your state that represents you at the House of Delegates that will vote." He goes, "Well, how do I tell them to vote for you?" I said, "Well, I guess you could contact them, but one of my opponents is also from your state, and I think they're supporting him." So it kind of, I think, is an anomaly about how people run for ADA president. But I talked a little bit about my trustee district. And so there are 17 trustee districts, which, except for mine, are really geographic. So some of the bigger states, like Texas, New York, California, are their own trustee district. And then other states kind of, depending on the population, make up the other districts. And the Board of Trustees is made up of 17 trustees, as well as some officers, the Speaker of the House, the Treasurer. And it's usually those individuals who trustees have a 4-year term, and the speaker, the treasurer have different terms. But when they're in the last year of their term, if they decide to run for president, then that is when they usually declare and run. Because as president of ADA, you have two main purposes. You are the spokesperson for the organization, and you're also the chairman of the board. So you're the chairman of the board of a $130 million company.
Wow.
And it's those two aspects that you have as your, as your job description. Your final year, like I said, when you're running as a candidate, you go to various caucuses, you visit various state dental association meetings. You get to know people, you tell them what you're about, and ultimately, at the House of Delegates meeting, there are 470 some delegates from all of the states, as well as from the American Student Dental Association. And it is that group that elects you at the House of Delegates meeting, after several visits to caucuses, after a speech that you give at the House of Delegates, and that's where the voting and ultimately the election takes place.
That's quite a
Yeah,
process.
that's one thing, to be honest with you. I've been a member of the ADA for the whole 17 years, 18 years that I've been a dentist, and that's the first time I've ever learned how to actually run for president.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah. We kind of, one of those things, since we have you here, we'd like to pick your brain a little bit. What does a typical day look like for the ADA president? Do you have an office somewhere that you go to, or do you actually still continue to practice in your own practice? How does that work?
So the answer to all of that is yes. And so what I would say is that there is no typical day, because every day is a little different. But I will tell you that on average, I worked in my office probably 2 days a week during my term, which was 2 years. So you serve a year as president-elect, then a year as president. Now, when I say about average, there were some weeks I was not in my office at all. And there was actually 1 week I worked 5 full days in a row in that 2-year period.
Wow.
You do have a office at the ADA headquarters building in Chicago. And I would say if any member is ever in Chicago and you want a tour of the ADA building, you own that as a member. You call the 800 number, talk to someone in member services and say you want a tour, and they will give you a wonderful tour of that building. The ADA occupies half of that 22-story building with its employees, and I had an office as president on the 22nd floor. And while I was in Chicago, it was out of that office that I worked. I would say that a good deal of time was traveling around the country, also out of the country to the sometimes European meetings, to the FDI, the World Dental Congress meetings. Most of it was within the United States, to dental associations, to dental schools, to student groups. I spent a lot of time in Washington. Wilmington, Delaware is very unique, and it's exactly halfway between New York City and Washington, D.C. on the Amtrak line. So there were times where, say, I had to meet with the Surgeon General or the Assistant Secretary of Health, Brett Giroir, who, you probably remember seeing, the gray-haired guy during the COVID discussions.
Yeah.
And so I had a meeting with each of those at 1:00. I was in my office till about 10, my dental office. I'd hop on a train, go down, let you off at Capitol Hill, and meet them at the Health and Human Services building. So, there was a lot there. There was a lot of political action. We have an ADA headquarters building in Washington, D.C., a 12-story building, which we occupy 2 floors of that. The rest of that is rental income that helps offset dues. And we also just purchased a 2-story office building on the Senate side, which is being renovated for our lobby team. We also have an historic townhouse on the House side that we utilize for political action. So that's where we disperse contributions. We have fundraisers. We open it up to other dental organizations who are in Washington, D.C. and need a place to call home or headquarters. And so it's being president, you're involved at really both of those locations at times. I can tell you that for my colleagues now, COVID and travel restrictions have kind of put a damper on a lot of that travel. And so I can tell you that within a given week, I'm not sure that there was, an average day, but it was extremely exciting, and I would say a very worthwhile experience. Dental students always want to know, how do you maintain a private practice and at the same time become president of dental organizations? And my honest answer to them is it's not a practice builder. So,
I mean,
there are times I can tell you that I had patients, call the office and they said the office was closed, and it's like, it was a Tuesday. That's odd. Dr. Cole's never not there on a Tuesday. They drove through and saw the parking lot empty, and they Googled my name, and I know they were looking for my obituary maybe,
Right.
but what they found out was I was ADA president. So they went from a burned up patient that couldn't get a hold of their dentist when they called for an appointment to like proud parents and pretty excited about what I was doing. So, but it was interesting.
We've talked a lot about how hard it is to be a dentist, you being the CEO of a business and, being the person who has to sit in the chair and do all the work too. And I can't even comprehend how it would be to try and do all of that plus manage the American Dental Association. That would like be stress that I just probably couldn't even handle.
Yeah. Well, I have to be honest with you. I can smile now. It's a lot stressful in hindsight.
Yeah. Right.
So Dr. Cole, in your private practice, if you had to pick, what would you say is your favorite thing to do, favorite procedure, and what's your least favorite if you had to pick?
Oh, my least favorite. So, I have a lot of favorite things in clinically. I would say now probably restoring implants is the most fun, especially because when I went to dental school, that wasn't taught. That wasn't even something on our radar screen, right? But that's a whole testament to lifelong learning.
Right.
I hesitate to say what I least like. I will tell you, as ADA president, when I was heavily involved, I would avoid some of those procedures um, that had a bigger likelihood for postoperative problems. So I started referring out a lot more endo, not because I didn't enjoy doing the endo, but if in fact somebody had a problem, I didn't want, a postoperative problem to then have to go to a specialist. So I referred them. I always loved doing surgery, but I started doing referring more and more surgery out only because of my lack of ability on a completely regular basis. I always had people taking call and that type of thing. But if you do a procedure and somebody has a problem, they want to be able to talk to you right away. They want you to address it. And so for some of those, I kind of went away. But I'll tell you, being in practice for, I've talked about our professional family, which our colleagues make our professional family. We also have our patient base, our family. And I've had kids that I've treated that are now starting to bring their kids in. And it's amazing as you watch families grow and, you become a big part of their lives. You see everything in time-lapse photography every 6 months, right? So you see these kids grow up. You become part of their family, their community, and that's probably the thing I love best about what I do as far as a practicing dentist.
Yeah, that's great.
Great answer.
Did you have a favorite or least favorite part of being the ADA president?
So for me, the best part has been really getting to meet so many fine people in our profession. I often tell people, dentistry in general is a small community. I'm talking nationwide. And it's amazing over time just how many contacts you make through dental school. You guys are living it. You make lifelong friends, right?
True.
These people are not only your colleagues, they become your best friends. I recently had one of the ASDA leaders come up to me, one of the current vice presidents, and she said, "Dr. Cole, I know why you like hanging around dental students. You get energy from us." And I have to say that's true. So, I have a bias. While I enjoy everyone within our profession, I enjoy interacting, talking with, and speaking to dental students probably the most. And they're also the ones that give you the hardest time in private. So, you have to be careful sometimes because they really like to yank your chain. But I'm hugely excited for the future of our profession. We're in good hands. We've got some sharp people there. I remember I was visiting the Medical University of South Carolina, the dental school. And I happened to be on the bus with another past president of the ADA. And we kind of looked at each other and talking about the caliber of dental students. And we both kind of confided, I have to be honest. I worry if I was trying to do it now, would I even be able to get into dental school? And so here are two presidents of the ADA. And it's true. I think that speaks to the caliber of the students and the new dentists that are out there. I'm just so proud of where our profession is. And that's why, we kind of talked earlier, what do you worry about? I worry about people getting frustrated or upset if everything doesn't work too smoothly in the beginning, because it all works out in the end.
Well, we'll get you out of here on this very important question. As a graduate of Georgetown University, who would you consider the best Georgetown University basketball player of all time?
Oh, you know what? So I am one to always give biases. Georgetown was my dental school. Villanova
Yeah.
University was my
Oh, okay.
undergrad.
Ooh,
And
rivals.
I happened to be in and around Georgetown in that classic '85 game where Raleigh Massimino brought
Yeah.
Villanova to beat Georgetown in the end. And so I would kind of, at this point here, talking basketball in the circles that I'm around is kind of like talking politics now in Washington, D.C. So I might have to take the fifth on that.
You got to be careful.
But at least I want to be obvious with my bias to my undergrad. So we'll kind of leave it at that one.
That's fair. Okay. Well, we can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. This has been excellent information. We really appreciate it. It's just your insight is just unique, and we couldn't. I just can't thank you enough. Marcus and Troy, do either of you have anything else to wrap up with?
No, I just really thank you very much for your time. This is going to be absolutely golden information for our listeners, and so thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I want to thank you guys not only for the invitation, but what you're doing to inspire, dental students and the future of our profession. I said everywhere, and because it's, from my heart, our future of our profession is really bright, and there's a lot that we need to do to overcome, but we're able to do that because of our professional family and because of our colleagues and our friends, and you guys show that. And so I want to thank you not only for this opportunity and invitation, but for what you do on an ongoing basis.
Thanks, thanks, Dr. Cole. That really means a lot to us. We appreciate that. And thank you all for listening. If you want to get in contact with us, you can email us at dentalrealist@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at dentalrealist. This has been episode 55, and we'll talk to you soon on episode 56.